and spending proposals could send the national debt soaring. That's according to a new study conducted by the nonpartisan Penn Wharton Budget Model. It says Trump's economic proposals would increase federal deficits by almost $6 trillion over the next decade. Just his plan to eliminate taxes on Social Security benefit comes with a $1.2 trillion price tag. The deficit increase will be about 5 times more than what they would be under the tax and spending proposals of Democratic nominee Vice President Kamala Harris. Scott Lincicome joins me now for more. He's the Vice President of General Economics at Cato's Herbert A. Stiefel Center for Trade Policy Studies. Scott, thanks a lot for being with us. There was a time when candidates in both parties at least felt some obligation to at least appear to be concerned about budget deficits. They had plans, but we don't seem to be in that period now. So in the absence of candidates raising it, how should voters think about the numbers in this model?
Well, they should understand that without substantial changes to our taxes and our spending, especially our spending, budget deficits are really going to just continue to increase. They're already, the debt is around 100% of GDP. It's forecast to go to maybe 130% of GDP in 10 years. And that's even without all of the new spending and tax cuts that both candidates are proposing. So they need to be aware that is the reality, whether we like it or not.
And so remind them some of the downsides. And I know there's considerable debate about how big a downside. Some people think we're just scaremongering in even talking about this. But the potential downsides to a situation where your debt is 100% of GDP or 130.
Yeah, well, the first is that all of that government debt can crowd out private investment in the private economy and can just slow down the economy over time. Lower growth means lower living standards, but it also will mean less tax revenue going forward as the economy is generating less output, and that can create kind of a vicious cycle of ever increasing deficits. The other problem, of course, is that the debt's not a problem until it is a problem, and at that point, it's too late. And what I mean is that the United States is in a privileged position that people want to buy U.S. debt. They see U.S. debt as a safe haven because of the stability of the U.S. economy. The problem is that when they decide otherwise, then it'll be too late. The United States would have to frantically try to raise interest rates to offer a better deal on that debt. Higher interest rates cause all sorts of problems with mortgages and credit cards and the rest. And then you could have a full-on debt crisis. Now, we're certainly not there yet, but we shouldn't even get close to that point because, like I said, if we ever get there, it'll be too late.
So in particular, since former President Trump's deficit numbers are so much higher, let's address what he says will reduce those numbers or, in fact, magically pay for it all, which is he says cutting taxes, including the corporate tax, will mean there won't be any budget problems because the revenue will be so great. Does that analysis hold up for you?
Well, certainly corporate tax reform, whether it's lowering rates or adopting full expensing provisions that encourage investment, that can contribute to growth. And there's a lot of room there for good tax reform proposals. But from a purely budgetary perspective, it's not going to be enough to close the gaping hole we have in our current budget. And a lot of that lies not just on the tax and the revenue side, but also on the spending side. And, in the olden days, Republicans would pair tax cuts with spending cuts as well, particularly reforming entitlement programs, Medicare and Social Security, that are really driving a lot of our debt. Today's Republican Party has no interest in that. So they're cutting taxes without any major spending reforms, and that's just not going to do it when it comes to the budget.
Scott, as a final question, we've got debates coming up. There's an election going on. If you had to pose a question to either or both of these candidates, do you have one in mind that you would pose that might help get at some of these challenges that they will face when they get in office?
Well, at the very least, I'd like them to both release detailed plans on their tax and spending proposals. The reality is that neither Republicans nor Democrats have given us analysts enough to really work with. So I guess my first question is, when are you going to actually release a serious economic proposal as opposed to a bunch of campaign talking points?
And they will tell you next year. Scott Lincicome with the Cato Institute. Thank you so much, Scott.